Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and we're nearing October and the scary movie season again, so we're going to be doing a bunch of Asian horror movie reviews this October. A lot of them are going to be retro kind of reviews to older films, but we have a new one tonight. And this is my review of House of Sayuri, also known as Sayuri, a Japanese horror movie from 2024 that was directed by Koji Shiraishi. Now, I've covered this director a lot over the years, to the point of reviewing dozens of his horror films in my Asian horror playlist. His filmography includes Noroi the Curse, Grotesque, A Record of Sweet Murder, and the Senritsu Kaiki File franchise, as well as Hellgirl, which is a more recent one. I'm always intrigued to see a newer film from this guy, so let's check out House of Sayuri. Now, the following plot synopsis was taken from the website Guy at the Movies. The 7-member Kamiki family finally found their dream home. However, soon after moving in, the vengeful spirit of a murdered girl named Sayuri terrorizes them. The haunting escalates from odd occurrences to lethal consequences for treading onto the property. Now, the eldest son Norio and his dementia-ridden grandmother must work together to handle the spirit and reclaim their home before it claims the lives of the entire family. So, in terms of production values, this feels more like a theatrical film rather than direct-to-streaming or direct-to-video, and I feel like this is a very relevant observation given this director's rich history of micro-budget movies, like the Senritsu Kaiki File franchise, for example. So House of Sayuri is more polished from a production standpoint. The opening flashback scene shows this ghost girl when she was still alive, as a human. And you wonder if she was maybe a hikikomori, or a shut-in, during her human life. You know, her mother is outside of her bedroom door, pleading her to come out and interact with the family. Unfortunately, this girl is non-compliant, and she has a bit of an attitude, which is evident when she throws some books at her bedroom door from the inside. So she definitely had some psychological problems while she was alive. In any case, we cut to the present day with our protagonist family of 7 people, and they're a seemingly normal bunch. But I would say some of their decision-making is a little bit questionable, which is something we typically see in horror movies, right? You know, after some horrific things happen in the home, they don't really discuss in detail a lot of the things that are going on. You know, they don't react like, man, there's some pretty crazy stuff going on here, we need to figure this out. They don't really do that, which is a bit odd, but the ghosts do psychologically impact the characters in ways that are out of control, you know? And there are a few scenes where they mention a doctor who exists off-screen who tries to explain these weird situations and events as consequences of stress from a change of environment or possibly even heart disease. So, you know, I know you're a doctor, man, but you're way off on this one. But one thing I like about most of Shiraishi's movies is their moments of unpredictability, and I must say that the plot of this film does take a few crazy turns that I was not expecting, and this is especially true during the second act of the film. There's also an infusion of black humor in this. Be ready for this because there's almost no humor in this movie during the first act. But if you're familiar with this director, you'll be perfectly fine with the shifts in tone. Now, some of the earlier horror scenes have a bit of an intensity to them, and that's generated from acts of violence, either through threats or brief attacks. The spirits enjoy coercing the family members to do bad things to each other. Maybe not exactly possession, but making them act weird and violent. At times, these ghosts do act directly in physical ways as well. One of these scenes is against a pretty vulnerable family member, and that did surprise me a bit. There also seems to be multiple evil spirits based solely on their sizes. One of them is like a small girl, and the other one is like a larger woman. So who is this other ghost, and what's the deal here? So it adds some intrigue. There are times when these spirits lurk in the background or creepily stalk the characters within the house. One of my favorite scenes involves a ghost floating towards a character and laughing. It's simple in concept, but I really enjoyed the execution in that scene. There's also a scene with a blinking light, and it actually reminds me of one of my favorite scenes of this director's entire filmography in the film Jurei the Uncanny. And it's similar to a scene in that film, but that's another big highlight for me. There's a bloody knife scene that's effective, and, this movie mostly avoids cheap jump scares, which I always appreciate. And the finale is pretty entertaining, but again, it does have a slightly lighter tone to it, as I mentioned previously. So I enjoyed House of Sayuri. If you're a fan of this director, this is an easy play. It does have some conventional elements to it, like the plot synopsis seems kind of conventional and cliche, but this director kind of has his own vibe, which definitely comes through in this film, and it gives the film some personality. So I do recommend this. Currently available streaming on DailyMotion with English subtitles. I'll include a link in the description box below. So here's a newer one for you. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.